It's a little too John Woo. There's too much like stunts on motorcycles and like midair collisions and doves. But
A lot of doves.
I watched 2 for the first time in years and years and years, and I actually really enjoyed it.
Well, there you go.
But,
in that case, watch them all.
I like doves. Fine.
Welcome to 1999, the podcast. I'm John Brooks.
And I'm Julia Sermons.
And this is our last podcast before the summer season starts. And we're going to move on to some more fun subject matter after this. This one is kind of a downer, but pretty interesting movie. We are discussing today a film with such a limited release, in fact, that it doesn't even rank anywhere in the 1999 box office charts. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival on January 22nd. And was released commercially on October 15th and went on to gross just over $60,000. Not a lot on, I think, one screen, but I couldn't get confirmation of that. Nor do I know what the budget was, so don't ask me. The directorial debut of longtime career supporting actor and occasional indie leading man Frank Whaley, who also wrote the script based partly on his own life. It stars Noah Fleiss in the title role, Karen Young, John Leguizamo, Whaley's friend and frequent collaborator Ethan Hawke, Camryn Manheim, Max Ligosh, a very young Kate Mara, and the reason we picked it, Whaley is The Doors co-star, the late Val Kilmer, who we recently talked about, as Joe's abusive alcoholic father. Today, we are talking about the winner of the Waldo Scott Screenwriting Award at the 1999 Sundance Film Festival, Joe the King.
There's people who do good, Joey. They have family, job.
You tell your old man, I want my money.
And then there are people like me.
What happened? The old man went nuts.
Don't get caught on the wrong side of that equation.
Sorry about your records, Mom. Every time I turn the corner, it's when's your old man gonna pay me? Tell your old man I better get my money. Hey, you owe him, so pay him. Get him off my back.
My ass, you found him. You're lucky I don't call the cops.
Give me the 100.
The Johnny Ray stuff is kind of hard to find. It all depends on how much you got to spend.
Money's no object.
Hey, you want to ride home?
I'm not done yet. Where'd you get that? Heist at the restaurant?
You're lucky I don't turn you in there for breaking and entering. What's this?
The money my old man owes you.
You must be Joe Henry. Well, I'm your guidance counselor. This whole tardiness thing, 54 times.
When I ask you to do something, you do it, right?
Right.
What are you gonna do with your life, huh?
Who are you calling?
The cops. It was the kid.
Who is it?
Open the door, police.
Trimark Pictures proudly presents Noah Fleiss, Karen Young, John Leguizamo, Ethan Hawke, Val Kilmer, and the acclaimed directorial debut by Frank Whaley.
Tell him Joe the King says hello.
So, Julia, what's Joe the King about?
Okay. In this gritty character study, director Frank Whaley introduces us to Joe Henry, played by Noah Fleiss. Joe is a scrawny 14-year-old living in upstate New York in the 1970s. Joe navigates the endless public humiliations of adolescence while also bearing the burden of a catastrophically dysfunctional family. His father, Bob, played by Val Kilmer, is a raging alcoholic whose outbursts are as predictable as they are devastating. His mother, Teresa, played by Karen Young, exists in a perpetual state of nervous exhaustion, and she may be moonlighting as a sex worker just to keep the family afloat. His older brother, Mike, keeps his distance from Joe to preserve his own social standing. We follow Joe's journey through the institutional neglect of 1970s America. At school, the adults who are supposed to care for Joe treat him with contempt, resignation, and sometimes outright violence. The teachers who once hated his father now transfer that loathing onto Joe. A guidance counselor, played by Ethan Hawke, is well-intentioned but clueless. The only adult who treats the boy with anything resembling kindness is Jorge, played by John Leguizamo, Joe's co-worker at a local diner. Joe commits a series of petty thefts, but his criminal career escalates when he robs the diner's owners. In a moment rich with symbolism, Joe catches his reflection while stealing their cash box. Disgusted with himself, Joe shatters the mirror with a kick and seriously injures his leg. But Joe seems to achieve a small measure of redemption when he uses some of the money to replace his mother's record collection, which his father had destroyed in a rage. Betrayed by a friend's casual remark to the incompetent guidance counselor, Joe is arrested and sentenced to juvenile detention. In a surprisingly tender moment, Bob warns his son not to follow in his footsteps. Joe's mother finds the records that Joe replaced and realizes that Joe is a boy who, despite everything, cared enough to try to repair what was broken. We last see Joe walking down the hallway of the juvenile facility, his expression ambiguous and his fate uncertain.
With a rating of 68 on Rotten Tomatoes and a 64 on Metacritic, critics were fairly widely divided on Joe the King, but generally unified in their praise of its performances, especially that of star Noah Fleiss, who, this being 1999, was inevitably compared to the likes of, as Rene Rodriguez said in the Miami Herald, Haley Joel Osment in The Sixth Sense, as among the best young actor performances in recent memory. In a modestly positive review, Amy Taubin in The Village Voice wrote, quote, that the film belongs to Fleiss and he makes Joe's inner life so transparent that it's heartbreaking to watch the boy dig himself into a hole. Edward Guthman in the San Francisco Chronicle raved about the film, writing, quote, there's a bit of home movie quality to Joe the King and a feeling of actors trying things they couldn't do in Hollywood movies. The biggest surprise is Kilmer, who transforms himself into a beer-bellied slob and appears shirtless. Maybe this is Kilmer's reaction to Hollywood's fitness obsession, an effort to crush his pretty boy image and win a broader range of roles. Hawke also went anti-chic for his role, gaining weight, wearing tight-fit polyester, and sporting a really bad haircut. It starts to feel like a gimmick, but it doesn't throw Joe the King off course. This is a smart film told in a minor key that augurs well for Whaley's directing career. But in the Chicago Sun-Times, Roger Ebert gave the film 2 stars, writing, quote, Frank Whaley's Joe the King has been described as, quote, semi-autobiographical, and you can feel the pain behind the story of a boy from a gloomy home where bad luck never seems to change. But you also can sense is too much self-pity. The film is so steeped in resentment that it's not able to pull back and let us see the boy behind the shield of his misery. And in the New York Times, Stephen Holden wrote, quote, that as a first-time director, Whaley is adroit at creating an atmosphere that reeks of cooking grease and motor oil. And he solicited performances from Kilmer, who developed a protuberant belly for his role, and Ethan Hawke as a gawky, ill-dressed high school guidance counselor that stripped these actors of their glamour. But dramatically, Joe the King feels unglued, as if crucial sequences have been left on the cutting room floor. Anyway, joining us to talk about Joe the King today is professor, award-winning writer, and film critic for, among other things, the aforementioned San Francisco Chronicle, Zaki Hasan. Zaki, welcome to 1999 the podcast.
Thanks so much. 1999 is a good year, so I'm very honored to be part of your flow.
It sure is a good year. This podcast is going on, I think, 3 years now, and there's still tons of movies left in the arsenal for us to deal with, including this one, which is kind of a hidden gem-ish kind of a movie. I don't know. We'll talk about how we feel exactly about this movie as we go forward. But it is this weekend is the beginning of summer movie season. So let me just ask you guys before we start, what are you guys looking forward to at the movies this summer?
Well, I just before we got on, I saw the new trailer for the new Jurassic, and you know, I say it all the time. I'm an easy mark for the Jurassic movies, but this one looks like quite good. Gareth Edwards is directing, and I don't know. I'm going in expecting more than just to be like, hey, dinosaurs and people running. I'm hoping for something special.
Yeah. Gareth Edwards and David Coop coming back to rewrite the script. David Coop obviously wrote the original Jurassic Park when he was like 28. Like, he was so fucking young when he wrote that movie. It's unbelievable. I found that out actually when we covered Stir of Echoes, which came out in '99, which Coop wrote and directed, just like how damn young he was when he wrote Jurassic Park. So yeah, I'm excited about that. I actually, confession, like really liked the third Jurassic World movie with like the original cast coming back.
Me too.
I thought it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Okay.
I liked seeing them back.
Yeah, I did too. It's like, it was a fun movie. Liked it a lot. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I hope it all works and it's not just more of the same and goes back to some of the stuff that made the original Jurassic Park the greatest summer movie ever made, but we will see. But fingers crossed. Julia, what are you looking forward to?
I saw the trailer, I guess, last week for 28 Years Later. And as a big fan of the original and like having very strong memories of it being like a awesome summer movie memory with my friends when 28 Days Later first came out. I'm pumped for that one. I don't know if Hamnet counts as a summer movie.
What? What is this? Hold on, I gotta look up what you're talking about.
It's based by a book, I think, by Maggie O'Farrell about Shakespeare and his son.
Oh, okay. Okay. With Paul Mescal.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, don't know if it counts, but enjoyed the book and I'm looking forward to it.
Chloe Zhao directed it. That's interesting. All right. Okay. No, I think that counts. My kids are very much looking forward to both Mission Impossible and Lilo and Stitch, which I will be seeing inevitably over the next week or so.
I'm seeing that tonight as we record this.
Which one you're seeing tonight?
Lilo. Yeah, I'm reviewing that for the paper. So
cool. So it has pretty good reviews so far. So fingers crossed. And I like that they brought back both Tia Carrere and Jason Scott Lee as in new roles. I think that was cute. Big fan of the original, so I'm not dreading going to go see that one. But we just rewatched the entire Mission Impossible franchise over the last couple months with my kids, and they're very excited. And we'll see how they do with a 3-hour movie, but I think they can handle this particular 3-hour movie. So we shall see.
As someone who has only seen the very first one, but I mean, enjoyed it very, very much.
Yeah, it's great.
Is the advice just start at number 2 and go all the way through?
Don't watch them all. 2. I would say watch 1, skip 2, and then watch 3 through 7. That's okay. Me. Don't.
Okay.
I still think watch 2 because I like 2 a lot, and 2 has one of my favorite like Mission Impossible moments ever. It's a little too John Woo. There's too much like stunts on motorcycles and like midair collisions and doves, but
lot of doves.
I watched 2 for the first time in years and years and years, and I actually really enjoyed it.
Well, there you go.
But
in that case, watch them all.
I like doves. Fine.
There's a thread from like when J.J. Abrams takes over right through the Christopher McQuarrie ones that's very obviously like that 2 feels a little bit like a strange detour for, but yeah, it's worth watching them all. I will say though that apparently the final reckoning it does tie back to the first movie in some meaningful ways, including the guy who he like steals the stuff from in that famous scene where he's like floating right and stealing from the computer, like is a character in the final movie, which I'm and the same actor like coming back to play
still
that
vomiting
role.
30 years later with the waste basket in hand, you know.
Have you seen it yet, Zaki? Have you
no, there was a press screening last week, and it was the night that I was giving my students finals. So I'm like, so I'll watch it. I'll watch it opening night.
Like a commoner.
Yeah.
one of the people. Cool.
I like seeing it with the crowds too. So that's kind of fun for me.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. totally understand. All right, let's talk about Joe the King. So had either of you
Exactly
guys...
like Mission Impossible. It's just
It is.
it's a
It's basically
perfect
it's
segue.
set in the same universe as the Mission Impossible. It's mostly a prequel to Mission Impossible. So Frank Whaley, we got Val Kilmer. We talked about Val Kilmer in an episode we did a couple weeks ago, in sort of in honor of his passing. And one of the things that makes Val Kilmer so interesting as an actor is like movies like this, where he very much kind of defied the actor that Hollywood wanted him to be, and he chewed up these kind of roles that he really, as a Juilliard trained actor, really kind of enjoyed. So we can talk about the performances separately, and the Frank Whaley-ness of it all. But had either of you ever even heard of this movie before doing this? Zaki, did you have a history with this movie?
Yeah, I saw it in the theater actually. I hadn't thought about it until you messaged me, and it was like a light bulb that kind of sparked to life. But because it came out, I had just started attending Columbia College in Chicago, which is a film school, that fall of '99, and I don't think I saw it then. It was either that semester or the following spring of 2000, but it was at this really dank, shitty, small theater with like 20 seats, if that, and I went with a group of friends, and I remember enjoying it then. So I hadn't seen it in 26 years. So revisiting it for this conversation was really interesting, watching it with the context of all the life I've lived since then, but I would say I liked it when I saw it. I would say I appreciated it when I liked it, and I'm still I appreciate it. I'm not in love with the movie, but
Yeah.
There's a lot in it that I really do like.
Yeah, I think I'm basically with you. More on that in a second, but Julia, you had not seen this, right?
I had not seen it. I think maybe I had not even heard of it. I had some. I'm with you both that there are parts of it I really like. I had trouble with it though. Just the kind of like Dickensian story where just like one awful adult makes one awful decision and makes his life awfully worse over and over and over again. It came across as like a bit over determined, I guess, and like a little saccharine maybe. Although I will say that I don't think that comes across in Fleiss's performance at all, which I think is very commendable. But the sort of narrative of it, and maybe what I guess it was kind of Ebert saw as the kind of like idea of like you haven't worked this all through in therapy yet, dude. Like maybe maybe take a beat before you commit it to the screen. I guess that's where I ended up.
Yeah, there's something very like, I mean, watching this again, there was something that I was kind of reminded, like I was taken back to this moment in the 1990s of people kind of just throwing the idea that something is brilliant around when there's a movie without a real plot, and this very sort of like organic approach to acting and dialogue that sounds more like it was improvised than written. And with the kind of, indie film sort of renaissance of the 1990s, I think that was a really big, like, that was kind of almost like a trope of these kinds of movies where like your movie was more interesting if it wasn't really about something and had this kind of like navel gazing quality that this movie had. And so I think it in some ways is kind of not a victim of its time, but certainly very much a product of sort of the things that were being kind of rewarded. Like I was really surprised that this won the Waldo Scott Screenwriting Award. And I think it's actually pretty well written. And I do kind of agree that like I think the final product and the script don't quite match up. I think the script was kind of maybe going for something a bit more ambitious than what the final product is, and I do think all the dialogue is very well written and the characters are very sort of believable. But like I also feel like that's sort of what people wanted from screenwriting in the late 1990s, and it's sort of just not the same. Like we've come a long way from that, I think, and to say that it's a little bit dated, I think is probably the best way to kind of articulate that.
I really like rewatching it. It put me back in the headspace of what it was like seeing it at that time, and it's very evocative of kind of what you were saying, like the indie sensibility circa the late '90s, and it reminds me of Smoke Signals and well, kind of even like a Good Will Hunting, even though I think Good Will Hunting is a much better movie, but
Absolutely, yep.
but I can see this one getting some oxygen because Good Will Hunting did well, because it's doing something similar. You have a troubled kid. It's kind of a showy supporting roles for well-known actor. I can easily see why Val Kilmer took this on, because it was a great chance for him to play against type. I don't think it comes together like Good Will Hunting does, but again, I remember what it was like as a film student watching this movie, being like, I could do something like this. Like, this is doable in terms of, you grab a camera and you don't need a big budget. You just get performances. And I appreciate the and this sounds condescending, I don't mean it this way, but I appreciate sort of the gumption of that, of like, let's just grab a camera and shoot and see what we get. And I think it's messy. But I think I see a personality in it, and I don't see a product. And so that's what I look at and say, well, I'm glad you did it, and certainly it betrays a lot of the telltale signs of a first time director. But I've only seen one other movie Frank Whaley's directed, and I'm like, well, I wish he'd do more, because I do think he's talented. I think he does have an eye, and I think he has a storytelling sensibility I'm interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a point of view in the film, and I do think there's some things that feel very very honest to me, in a way that you would want a film based on your childhood to be like, and that like they felt the like the his little like cadre of buddies, and his two friends, and whenever they're interacting with each other in this kind of like overly adult, or like wanting to be adult manner, and the way they talk to each other, and then it's just them hanging out and stuff, like I found that very true and very compelling. And that scene where his brother is out on the date, and um he kind of gives Joe the brush off, because he's with this girl he wants to impress, and Joe's a little embarrassing, and like that whole scene felt very real to me. It was just kind of like, it's just kind of the like, I hesitate to say this exactly, because like I'm sure people in the 70s were this neglectful and abusive to children who very clearly needed help. Like I'm absolutely sure that that was the truth, and I'm sure that Whaley may have experienced that. But just the kind of like one bad thing after another, that like structure of the just like constantly, like every time an adult should intervene, it goes wrong, and just like constant, like it felt a little, maudlin. It felt a little like Hallmark movie, or like Lifetime movie, in terms of like the way it depicted abuse, or like the kind of everyday suffering of people in this place and time. I saw that um Whaley took some inspiration from Truffaut and the 400 Blows, and like I feel like I've the past couple episodes, I've kind of turned this into not 99 the podcast, but watch movies from the 1950s the podcast. But if you do watch 400 Blows, like there's a real airiness to it and a lightness to it.
Yeah.
And part of like the an experience of the thrills of being a child, in addition to what he's suffering at home and what that causes him to do at school and stuff. And it just felt like I'd want a little more room for this to breathe, I guess is how I would put it.
It needs what, you know, the equivalent of like comic relief of like, it needs joy breaks, right? Like there's really never a moment here where you're sort of like, something good happens to your protagonist that you can kind of lean on, right? It is very sort of punishing in how kind of relentlessly bleak the whole thing is. Yeah, I just feel like a lot of that is that there's a lot of like pretty kind of interesting choices and ideas that are sort of presented here that are never really fully fleshed out, and it's kind of Whaley's, I think, commitment to, as a first time director, this kind of like vision that a lot of that sort of gets lost. Like I think about the beginning of the movie and sort of the way that it's kind of very surreal, right, and sort of very like not quite, especially with with young Joe, right, and that scene with Camryn Manheim, and it's very sort of like, it doesn't really feel like it's taking place in the same reality as the rest of the movie, right? And the movie kind of gets a little bit like more serious and grittier as it goes on, which I think is, you know, as it sort of cements itself into like its own reality, is kind of interesting. There's like this moment where that I thought was really fascinating, where like he's really suggesting something with like the hair lip kid, where he like pees in his dinner to get revenge on him beating up his brother, but like the camera suggests there's something very like wrong with this kid's life as well, and it's very empathetic towards him, and like Joe kind of gives him this look of regret after he's like gotten his revenge and that sort of thing, and so like it really does dig into the like human empathy side of it, but yeah, without giving us something like, to Zaki's point, and this is this is something you said, Good Will Hunting, and the whole time I'm like, wait, are we gonna find out he's like a math genius or something? Like when's the like big redemptive story about why we care about this person gonna happen? And it kind of never does, and because it sort of leans on those tropes, like I was kind of expecting that and then kind of never got it, and yeah, I mean, it's an unpleasant movie, right? Like it just sort of is, right? That's just kind of its aesthetic.
You ain't wrong.
I mean, but like, so what's good about? So okay, there is like, I want to talk about what's good about it, because there's a lot good about it as well. Fleiss's performance is fantastic. He hasn't done a ton of acting, but like he was, the whole movie dies without him. Ethan Hawke's great. Kilmer is obviously great. This is a really, really good John Leguizamo performance as well. Like, I feel like he is really squeezing a lot out of this very small character. Leguizamo was supposed to direct the movie, and he couldn't because he was performing in Freak on Broadway at the time. Although, Julia, I kept thinking he was like coming straight from the set of Summer of Sam. Like every time he showed.
Yeah.
I thought that's very like bring back and forth between.
Yeah, but second great Leguizamo performance from 1999. The characters are not that dissimilar, I would say, and that there's like a lot of peacocking about their sexual prowess. But I think his was probably my favorite performance in the movie, but closely tied with Karen Young as the mother. But when Leguizamo is in the diner and he sees that Joe is just kind of eating scraps because he's starving, he just like immediately takes charge, and he's like, "Get this kid a sandwich. Can we get this kid a sandwich?" And I was like, we all need that person in our life who makes sure we get sandwiches. You know, it was just such a lovely protective instinct kind of swooping in there at a moment. It's a moment of grace that Joe sorely needs.
I was struck by sort of just the the charisma that, I mean, he's just a charismatic performer. And then I start spitballing out. I'm like, we should have gotten so much more John Leguizamo over the last, 25 years. I mean, bro's never stopped working, so like he's done fine. But I mean, just a magnetic guy,
Yeah.
and so he really enlivened it whenever he was on screen. But to the point you were making earlier, I mean, honestly, all Noah Fleiss is fantastic, but all the adult supporting performers are doing interesting stuff. It's not obviously showy, but it showcases their talent. I think Kilmer. I remember seeing this, back then and thinking you know, it was a shift for Val Kilmer. And what I realized in hindsight is pretty much from this point to the end of his career, he was doing these like just supporting roles for the most
Yep.
part.
Yep.
And so this kind of kickstarted him in that direction. He is so good, Kilmer. That the scene in the car at the end, fantastic.
Yeah, that scene in the car really is. I mean, the whole performance is great, but that scene in the car really is where he, where he sort of knocks it out of the park. Yeah, we talked about this when we talked about Kilmer. Is that like his when we think about Kilmer as like the Hollywood star, like the career really is like the 1990s. From like kind of Tombstone through The Saint, right?
Yep.
But then like once The Saint kind of flopped and he sort of fell out of favor, he was freed up to like do this kind of thing, which if you've seen the documentary Val, like this is very clearly like what he prefers to be doing.
Right.
And yeah, it's one of those movies that again I would point you to if you ever like had any doubt of Val Kilmer as an actor. Like it's a really it's just saying a lot about like who the character is with like very little, which I think is true of all the performers here as well. I think the child performances are really fantastic in this, like across the board. Like there's none of the young actors are missing a beat at all. That's really hard to pull off. Like this movie is kind of worth seeing for that reason on its own. Is like getting a couple of really good child performances is one thing. Like getting like 6 of them is is really something. And the kid who plays Ray, I think his name's James Costa. I love that character, and one of the few like truly funny moments in this movie where I laughed out loud is in that scene that Julia was alluding to earlier, where he sort of spills the beans on the robbery. Ethan Hawke is asking this like if the name of the restaurant spelled a certain way, and he's like, "Don't ask me to spell things."
The way he kept saying in that scene, "You got the wrong guy, man. You got the wrong guy." And this is like this like delightful childhood appropriation of adultness, or like he's like in the hot box and he's being shaken down. Like just I loved that character and I loved that performance throughout. But
yeah, and it's like it's horrible that his mom had to be such a monster, but like it works for comedy because of the way he turns into this just like absolute like brute when he is just swearing his head off at her, right, and just calling her terrible names because of the way that she is so abusive towards him. Like it shouldn't be funny, but like the way that because he is that very specific kind of character. And I think we all knew this kind of kid too, like the sort of like D&D nerd who's also a delinquent, right? Like it's a very specific sort of high school or like middle school character trope that is very, very funny. And yeah, I was kind of annoyed. I was bummed to see that he really hadn't done a lot in his career. His last credit I think is the early 2000s, but yeah, it's a very good and funny.
He was in Mimic, which I was surprised to see that the Guillermo del Toro movie.
Yeah, he was in LIE as well with Brian Cox and Paul Dano. It's a indie film from early 2000s, but yeah, he hasn't really done very much. But yeah, what about like one of the reviews that I read was critical of not the performance, but the way that his brother is characterized, and sort of the way that the brother character is used. I don't know. I'm a little torn about this, but thoughts about either the performance or the sort of framing of the brother character.
I mean, to go into the way he's used side of things.
Yeah.
I kind of like forgot he existed for
Yeah.
significant chunks of this movie, that the
Yeah.
character existed.
Yeah.
He's the Chuck Cunningham of this movie.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, Julia. Like whenever he was off screen, I would be like, oh right, he has a brother. And it feels like it's intentional, but I'm not really quite sure like what the end goal was.
Well, I took I that's how I would read it. Is it's a reflection of Joe's feeling of isolation, where his worldview. He has a brother who sort of flits in and out of his life, but he doesn't really have a connection to him. And as somebody, I'm very close with my brother. I was very close with him growing up. Like that's alien to me. And so to me, that gets me down this rabbit hole of this kid's life is such where, imagine not even being close to your own brother as a kid. That's so sad, very Dickensian, to go back to what we were saying.
Yeah, he just kind of like barely registered for me. Like there's that one scene where he's, it's sad that he's fobbing his brother off, to, maintain his own social status, that felt like a very true moment that was well done. And then, yeah, he kind of just sort of flit in and out, really, in a way that, I mean, I don't know, like how would you expect two brothers to survive what these two brothers had to endure? Like, does it bring you closer, or do you distance yourself from each other? And I kind of would have liked to see that question answered more, maybe.
Yeah. Frank Whaley is an interesting character. I wonder if people listening to this podcast without looking it up know who Frank Whaley is. You know what I mean? Like he is he is one of the all-time that guys of film history. He's probably best known as like, the big brain on Brett from Pulp Fiction.
You know what they call a quarter pound of a cheese in France?
No.
Tell them, Vincent.
Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese. You know why they call it that?
Because of the metric system?
Check out the big brain on bread. You're a smart motherfucker. That's right. The metric system.
If you happen to have seen Career Opportunities with Jennifer Connelly, that's sort of his one major sort of starring vehicle role. But he is, like, I refer to him as like a career supporting actor, like not a character actor, but like a career supporting actor, like a guy who is a supporting role in a lot of really interesting movies. He's always quite good, like on Midnight Clear. Like he's had a really great career. I think the problem, and I was trying to do some research on this as I was watching this movie. I think part of the issue why this movie doesn't click is like I don't really know how close this is to Whaley's life, and he's not very public about like how autobiographical this is. So, he's a guy who and I'm not saying this to be mean, like I don't really care about him, right? Like in a way, like I'm not invested in like the life of Frank Whaley the way I would be with a number of other actors, where I'm really interested in knowing what their childhood was like. And he has never really been sort of very upfront about how much of this is like directly autobiographical, or how much of it is sort of based on his like memory of childhood, right? Sort of filtered through this drama. And I think that's I think that's a problem for me. Like, I think part of the reason why this movie doesn't quite land the way I want it to is that I feel like Frank Whaley is, for someone who has been a fairly, hardworking movie actor for a number of decades, is kind of a non-entity. And so a lot of that sort of personal, emotional stuff never quite lands.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I think that's a valid point.
I mean, did either of you, like, how Are either of you guys like giant Frank Whaley stands? Or is this...
I feel bad saying no now, you know? It's like...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I know of him at all besides Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, I like Swimming with Sharks is a great movie.
I liked Swing Kids.
Swing Kids, yeah. You know, he's really good in that as well. Like, he's never put in a bad performance, and I've always really liked him, and I've always known who he is. But it's weird to me because like when you have a personal film like this, it just seems like a connection to the creator is kind of necessary, and none of this is to at all be. I'm not like, this is not a personal attack on Frank Whaley. I think he's great. It's just I want to know more about his life so that I can like feel more connected to what's going on here, right? And for a movie that is, as Roger Ebert says, like this kind of indulgent, right? It just sort of feels like it's necessary to know more about him. I have a couple of thoughts about this question, but I want to ask you guys, like, what would, I mean, aside from Julia, what you said about sort of more moments of levity, which I completely agree with, you know, and it was a first time writing and directing attempt, what would make this a better movie?
Well, I think the point you made earlier about sort of like, you know, when we look at the Good Will Hunting of it all and how it culminates in, you know, a broader moment of catharsis. I mean, I think my sense is that the conversation with the dad in the car is meant to be that, and I appreciate that. But I think some sense, I like the ambiguity of the ending.
Yeah.
See, to me, this is very late '90s indie cinema where it's like, hey man,
Yep.
you're not answering. What do you think? You know, and I genuinely I appreciate that. I think that's fine. That's what you're going for. But
Yeah.
I think some sense of, if not, you know, after he got out of jail, this happened. I'm not saying that, but some sense that there is a greener pasture on the other side, that there is some sense of something potentially better waiting for him, you know. And uh, I'll be honest, the thing that Kilmer says about, you know, there's good people and then there's people like me, and which equation, you know, what's funny is, again, I hadn't thought of this movie in forever, but that conversation has always stayed in my head, right? So that's something that says something about what this movie does. I think for me personally, some sense that Joe is going to be somebody different on the other side of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and nothing that hits you over the head, but just you know, just put your thumb on the ambiguity a little bit.
The staring into the camera as the camera pans towards his face, that doesn't do it for you. That's not conclusive enough that he's a changed person.
Not necessarily. Yeah.
No, I and Roger Ebert made that same point as well. Like this character and this performance is like almost too good for the story, because it does make you want to see him on the other side and like know what he does with his life. And I think the implication is that like the answer to that question is Frank Whaley's career. It's like that's the answer, right? And but again, like I don't know enough about Frank Whaley to like make that jump, right? So that's again part of that same problem. Julia, what do you think about like?
I think sort of more multi-dimensional performances, which is like not that I think the performances themselves are bad, but that they were given a little bit more room to breathe, you know, and so that people are not just the adults are not just like entirely angry or entirely exhausted or entirely hapless or entirely drunk, you know, like, because that moment with Val Kilmer in the car as he's dropping him off at the bus to take him to the facility, like it's beautiful. It's completely beautiful, and it's so all the more poignant for the fact that it may be too late. Like it may be that this conversation has just come too late, and that Kilmer knows that he should have had this conversation before. But like that's the most they really give Kilmer to work with, you know, other than kind of like the kind of standard angry drunk dad beats, you know.
Yeah.
And I would say I think like apart from, and like Camryn Manheim just comes across as a little like mustache twirly villainy, and just like if they were allowed to be, like institutional actors who have intentions and have misconceptions and have prejudices, but all kind of have more than one facet to their role, and why they act the way they do and why they fail this kid. I think that would be an important improvement for me.
I think that the Val Kilmer scene, I think, is meant to be juxtaposed against the scene with his mom in the diner, where she says to him, "Be a good boy," and he says to him, like, "There are good people and bad people. Like, be one of the-" like, where it's clear that what he says to Joe is much more sort of meaningful and like actionable than what his mom says. And I like I was like, that doesn't really register in the way that the movie is like written and edited, right? And I think that's sort of part of the problem, like this feeling that there's just a bunch of stuff that like didn't make the final cut, that it doesn't really quite know exactly how to sort of organize the story. I mean, the thing that really stood out to me that I think would have made it a better movie, in terms of what it's trying to do, and also just to give it some sort of narrative tension, is that the robbery should have happened way earlier, right? Like, we should be dealing with the anxiety of him having committed this robbery and like not being found out like much earlier in the movie, which I think would have given it a lot more sort of like emotional heft, right? And sort of given him a conflict kind of to dwell on the entire time. Because I like the ambiguity of the ending, where you kind of just get the feeling that he's finally like in the right place, and unfortunately like that means in state custody. It's like that the whole sort of like the early 1970s Long Island suburban life is like so chaotic that the best place for him is like the juvenile hall. um which was sort of an interesting way to kind of end it, but there wasn't enough sort of dramatic tension to kind of build to that moment, right? And it's a weird irony of a movie that is at once like too short and too long at the same time. Like when I was like 30 minutes into it, I'm like, wow, I feel like I've been here for a long time. And like that partly is because it's kind of draggy, and partly because it's also very sort of, I don't know, like immersive. Like it does feel like you're just sort of watching real people living their lives in this interesting way. So like it weirdly needs another half hour, but is also too long as it is. So I don't really know like what to make of that. But again, maybe it is the product of like first time writer director syndrome.
I was actually wanting to ask you both that, like, where does it stand in terms of movies that are made by first time directors who are actors, like actors transitioning into film directing, and their first movies, and does it share any similarities or strengths or weaknesses? I know that's not really like a genre of movies, but
it kind of is though.
It's a DVD box set. First time actors directing their own script.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
It's a good question.
I'm not sure off the top of my head, to be honest. I'd have to pull some comparisons up in my mind, but I think it betrays a lot of it. I got big film school energy from this.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not meant as a pejorative, but it's meant as, there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So I think it is indulgent. I think to your point about, sort of just creating this swamp of misery that we put the character in. I mean, there's that sense of like, it'll create a more, empathetic situation for people to relate to the characters in. And I think that to the point we've raised earlier, I think that is a mistake, because what it does is give a story that's very lopsided dramatically, and it robs it, to the point you were making, Julia. It robs us of a full spectrum of life from all of the characters, and so it makes them less human as a result. I think I can see why the actors enjoyed being in these specific lanes, but I think with the benefit of hindsight, and again, I'm looking at this as a parent now. Like when I watched it back then, I was thinking about my relationship with my dad. Watch it now, I'm thinking about my relationship with my kids, and so
Yeah.
I'm seeing what Whaley's doing, right? Because it's like Joe is our main character, and this is what his dad might be, a fully rounded person. We assume he is, but these are the snippets of what he sees, and so this is the image he's formed of him, and therefore that's the image we form of him. And that's, I don't know, that makes me sad, because it seems like Bob is not a good guy, but he's also he's a human being. He's got the full spectrum, and we don't necessarily see all of that.
We do see at the very beginning, right, how humiliating really his job is, and how poorly he's treated when he's working as the custodian janitor at Joe's school. Like that's that scene where he's kind of being told off by the principal or whoever it is. It is really a scene where a character has to bear the burden of people having already given up on you, right? Or having zero expectations of you because of your past. And I think, like that is another moment, I will say, where we refeel Bob as a more fully fleshed character.
Yeah.
Having gone to Ithaca College, the film school 90s, and was in Ithaca College in 1999, that resonates with me, as this is it's a very film school-y kind of movie. Yeah, I mean, I think like so the first person I thought of, Julia, when you said like actors turned directors for the first time, is like Olivia Wilde, whose first movie is Booksmart, which is amazing. So maybe that's not the best example. I was trying to think of like some other ones. The other one that really sticks out to me is like Sofia Coppola, right? Who also like Virgin Suicides is also 1999. We haven't talked about that one yet. That's coming up sometime in the future.
Gone Girl, Ben Affleck, or sorry, Gone Baby Gone. That was it. Sorry.
Right. And I think in some ways, like Good Will Hunting, while they didn't direct it, is also like very much kind of their movie and them turning from actors to directors. And I think like, this movie and Good Will Hunting and Virgin Suicides, like all of them imperfect in their own ways, right, have a lot of the same sort of issues. Or even like Jon Favreau and Swingers, right? There's like a very clear sort of, he didn't direct that either, but it's his movie. And there's a very clear sort of like trajectory in the imperfections of Swingers that also like, is very much in line with who Jon Favreau ultimately sort of ends up being. I will admit that I think, Zeki, you're the only person who has seen another Frank Whaley movie. I have not seen the other stuff that he has been behind the camera for. So I think you're someone who could talk to this. What is the other movie that he's made that you've seen, and how do you see do you see any sort of progression between this and that?
Yeah, so the other movie of his I saw was called the Jimmy Show. And that was from the early 2000s, and that was another one I saw because it came out very shortly after this. So I remember going with my friends to see that at I think that was like a festival screening. And I liked that one. I haven't revisited since then, but I think that one. So he's in that. He has the lead role, but it's more of it's another slice of life type story. It's about a guy who's he's like a wannabe stand-up comedian. That's the gist of it. But Ethan Hawke was in that, and I forget who else is in that. But I between both of these, I'm like, well, I think the guy has talent. Like, I mean, I would like to see him make more movies. I don't know if he's done anything since then, but as a director, but I liked the Jimmy Show, you know.
I'll have to watch that and see how it stacks up to this. Because again, like I've always liked Frank Whaley, and I have nothing bad to say about him. And he was nice enough to make this movie free on his Vimeo account. So if you want to watch Joe the King and don't want to pay for it, go to Frank Whaley's Vimeo and watch it for free.
You're doing
there.
It with Frank's permission, clearly.
We are. Well, I mean, implicitly, right? Like he uploaded it. I'm pretty sure it's actually his Vimeo account. There's only one video on it, and there's not a ton of activity. But I'm pretty sure it says Frank Whaley, and I would be surprised if anybody else was impersonating Frank Whaley and uploading Joe the King to Vimeo. I'm not sure.
Who would pretend to be Frank Whaley? That's that's like
There's
the Untouchables where Kevin Costner is talking to Sean Connery, and he's like, "I'm a treasury agent." He's like, "Okay, well, how do you know I didn't make that up?" He's like, "Why would you say you're a treasury agent if you're not?"
Right. Why would you say you're Frank Whaley? Okay, before we wrap up, is Julie, anything else you want to touch on with this before we move on to final questions?
No, I think we covered my stuff.
Zaki, anything else you want to say about this before we move on?
Just one thing, actually. Man, when Bob destroys her record collection, man, that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
What a shitty thing to do. That's all. Don't do that. That's awful.
Don't destroy people's records.
Yeah,
people. I think that's the moral of the story. That's what the movie's about.
And it does make the ending so much more poignant, doesn't it? When you find that he spent the money to replace them, and his mom finds the records.
Yeah.
And also, like, I'm not to belabor this, but like another thing that I would have liked to have spent more time with, because this is one of those things where like it actually is quite joyful, is like I love the record store owner character, and I love the scenes where he's in the record store, and there's just not enough of them, and it needs to be like that's a levity moment that sort of
yeah, and that's the delights of childhood, right? Just like browsing through the record store, with such anticipation. Like that's a real moment in this kid's life that would be fun to see.
And also realizing that like you can't carry a box like that on your bike. And that moment is actually very hilarious that he's trying to get that on his bike. So it's worth watching. So and you can watch it for free on Vimeo. So go ahead and watch Joe the King. And if you have intense thoughts about Frank Whaley, then by all means email us and tell us those thoughts. All right, before we go, Zaki, we got two things we have to ask you. So the first question for you, and you may use internet resources if you have to, but maybe you won't have to. What is your favorite movie from 1999?
It's hard to pick. But at the moment you're asking me, I will say The Sixth Sense.
Okay. So the other classic child performance movie of the year. Why?
That was a movie that I had the very good fortune of seeing it opening night, and it being my second choice. So it was not even really on my radar. I always joke about this. My friends and I, we went to see Mystery Men.
Yeah.
That Ben Stiller superhero movie.
Oh, and one of my favorites.
It was sold out. So we're like, okay, well, there's this Bruce Willis thing. You want to see that? Okay. And I always say, talk about the single perfect way to watch The Sixth Sense. Opening night without having seen a trailer, without any expectations. And that's sort of like I feel like I got this perfect experience, and so I got to watch it, and then I got to see the conversation begin around that. But I screen that in my classes every semester, and it's so gratifying to see the majority of students just have this reaction, and I watched it with my oldest son. He's 18 now, and maybe like a couple of years ago I watched it with him, and I always said, like, my job as a parent was to raise you right, make sure you go to school, stay away from drugs, etc., preserve the secret of The Sixth Sense. And so I was like, all right, son, it's time. I don't know how much longer I can keep it, And so, when we get to the end, and my son, he goes, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, that moment, and I think it is a masterpiece. I think it remains a masterpiece, and I think that Shyamalan, he's had his ups and downs, but he happened to make one of the greatest suspense thrillers ever made, and that's his little asterisk in history, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, like I love Unbreakable as well, and I will say about Shyamalan is that he has never really sold out, right? And there's something to
Yeah.
be said for that. Even when he's made some very good movies in the interim, and I don't think anything will ever touch that one, right? But like he also is very true to himself, which I really admire. And sometimes you end up with The Happening, and sometimes you end up with Unbreakable, or The Village, or whatever. Like sometimes it's Lady in the Water, sometimes it's
sometimes it's Trap.
Sometimes it's Trap, right? So yeah, I really admire that. I also I remember this very well because I'm a big Mystery Men fan, but also like you're right, nobody was talking about this movie, right? This was a very much word of mouth kind of thing. There was this like massive critical response to it when it screened for critics, but like it still didn't quite catch fire until it was a real sort of viral sensation. The movie that I was looking forward to that weekend was Mystery Man, and like that's what I went to go see opening weekend. And I think I probably went to go see Sixth Sense on Monday or something, and then I had to go see it again the next day because I was like, how the fuck did I miss that? And it's really delightful. And I also like I do every year I do like a week at the end of the school year on film criticism. We do these like special week-long seminar courses at my school, and a couple of years ago I showed them The Sixth Sense, and yeah, it has been long enough that they don't know what the ending is, right?
That's
and like
what's great. Yeah, we're
terrifying.
all the way past. Yeah, yeah.
But it's no longer like just a culturally known meme among this whole generation. But one person had figured it out before the ending, which out of like 25 in the room, and I think that's about right.
Can I just tell you, so I screened it a few weeks ago, and after class, students were talking to me, whatever, and then one kid asked me a question. I was like, "Hey, what'd you think of this movie? It was good, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, well, it was a little slow in the middle, so I Googled it to see how it ends."
Oh no!
Oh no!
Can you believe that? I'm like,
automatic F.
Oh yeah, no,
automatic
no.
F.
Why? What do you even say to that?
I can't. Oh my god! So that's why I take their phones away before we start watching the
It
movie.
would also, yeah.
Yeah.
The only way that could be more soul crushing is if like they chat GPT the ending, and then chat GPT gave them a different wrong ending, different twist ending.
I don't know if you remember this, but like this is one of my fondest / most sort of like cringy 1999 memories. Is it might even have been like early 2000, I don't know, but Craig Kilborn used to do this thing where he would like ruin a movie every week, and it was like one of his segments. And one of my best friends was like one of the last people alive to have seen The Sixth Sense. Like he still hadn't seen it a couple months in or whatever it was, but because of the nature of the internet at the time, like it had not been ruined for him, and like people did not tell him what the ending was. So he was like definitely going to go see it very soon. I think we even had plans to like go see it that weekend or something. And like one of our roommates was watching TV, and then Craig Kilborn just like blurted out the ending of The Sixth Sense, and he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Oh, fucking hell!" So like, the entire experience for him was ruined forever. But he got to go in knowing what the trick was and being able to like watch the magic trick being performed, which is also sort of, when you watch it knowing the ending, is sort of the joy of watching it now, is being like, how was I fooled by this trick, and how meticulous, right, it is, because at some point you're like, it's so obvious, right? Like when it's so obvious, but it really is very carefully sort of the mood and the framing of everything is like so precise that I definitely was fooled, and I don't know anybody who wasn't. So
figuring out how things are done is its own kind of magic.
It is. I mean, I literally went back and watched it the next day. Like I paid to go see it again because I was like, I need to figure out how I didn't see this, right? I was like, I swear to God, he was talking to his mom on that couch when he came home, right? And it's like, nope. It was suggested that he was, but there was no actual talking. And I was like, oh man.
Yeah, Nate Bargatze has this great routine where he talks about how, like, the first scene of the movie, you see him get shot with a gun. and we're like, oh man, this guy's wife's not talking to him for a year, man. It's a movie about marriage, like that's the leap people make, as opposed to no, it tells you right up top.
It is. And like the one kid who figured it out, like that's why he's like, why haven't we talked about the gunshot at all? And I'm like,
smart
okay,
kid.
You got it. Donnie Wahlberg shot you, and nobody's talking about it. That seems weird. Also, like, I had to go back to be like, wait, that was Donnie Wahlberg? That was the other thing I had to go see again.
Yeah, that's
like,
right. Yeah.
How is that Donnie Wahlberg? But I see it now. But man, I was used to him.
He and his brother both had great 99 performances, because Three Kings with Mark Wahlberg, he was great.
Another one we have, believe it or not, after like 3 years of like not talked about that movie yet either. The well runs deep in 1999. Okay, last question. When you are cornered at a party, what is the movie that you tell people is your favorite movie ever?
Planet of the Apes.
The movie or the planet?
That is my all-time favorite movie.
Why?
That is the movie. I saw it when I was old enough to appreciate the craft, because I think the makeup appliances are amazing, and I was just looking at that level. But I was able to, I was probably 9 or 10 when I saw it. I really plugged into the social commentary and the metaphor and everything, and all the feelings that I had, where it pulled in on an adventure story, but it's also scary and it's exciting and it makes you think, and all of those levels. And I'm like, this is movie magic. That's what it's about for me, and it's a movie I don't even know how many times I've seen it, since the late 80s when I saw it for the first time.
So I have to ask you then your feelings about both the recent trilogy, mm-hmm. and also the Tim Burton
one. So I think the Caesar trilogy that, which spanned 2011 to 2017, I think that's one of the best movie trilogies we've gotten in the last 30 years. I think it's tremendous, and I think those films have benefited from this. Is something I tell my partner on my show. They benefit from being successful, but not too successful. So like they do just well enough for the studio to be like, okay, just keep doing what you're doing. It's fine. And they get to tell these stories that are a little dark and a little, they're not Happy Meal movies. And I think that's, mm-hmm. I think, and that applies for the latest one last year. As far as the Tim Burton movie, I'll tell you, that you talk about, for me, I spent most of the 90s waiting for a new Planet of the Apes movie, because that's how long they've been talking about it. And then finally, and we're doing it, and we got Tim Burton coming on, and I'm like, and Rick Baker's doing the effects and whatever.
Yeah.
And Mark Wahlberg, who I liked in Three Kings, I was like, all right, hey, okay.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? And I remember this was a movie where I watched it opening night, and I was like, no, it's good. And then I went again the next time. I'm like, no, it's good, right? And I had to convince myself it was good. It's unfortunately, it's not good. And I think the giveaway, in hindsight, I remember Tim Burton gave an interview, and he said, I like the original movie, but what I didn't like is that the apes don't act like apes in the original movie. They act too human. And you're like, well, that's the point.
That's the point.
They're like humans. That's the whole thing, And so you realize, like, when you have, they're jumping around and shrieking and whatever, it's like, I don't think you got it, Tim. Like, I respect the man's skills. This was a mismatch of man and material. And so it is what it is. It has a great score by Danny Elfman. The makeup effects are great, but the movie is just a lot of nothing. And I just watched it last year for the first time with my kids, and because they had never seen it, and they're like, no, it's not good. So I'm like, okay, well, I trust their instinct, because they've seen them all, because I'm their dad. So they've they've been through the grinder. They didn't like it. So I'm like, okay, unfortunately, but if not for that one, we don't get the studio 10 years later being like, all right, let's go back to formula, do something closer in spirit to the to the other ones, you know.
Where you do make them more ape-like because it's a prequel. So
exactly. Right.
It makes sense.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That you're doing that. Yeah, I still kind of love Tim Roth in that movie, and
he's great.
And I kind of love the ending.
Yeah,
just it's so fucking ridiculous, and I'm like, that's great.
Well, you know what's funny is the DVD release came with a little card that explains the ending.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, and he traveled back to here, and then somebody here traveled to like they. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen that before or since, where the movie comes with a little explainer card, so that when you're scratching your head at the end, it's like, no, just look at this thing, and it'll walk you through it.
The DVD of Mulholland Drive did not explain the movie. It had a card explaining the movie, but it had a card with like 14 questions from David Lynch that was supposed to help you guess what the movie was about.
How very Lynchian. I love that.
Yeah. Which makes me think now that you're telling me this, it makes me think like they wanted to do an explanation card. They just wanted to do the same thing. And David Lynch was like, fuck you, I'll give you 14 questions.
Oh man, that's too funny. We could have a whole different conversation about the way that I think Batman's success poisoned people's minds into thinking it's a good idea to give Tim Burton other people's intellectual property, which has basically never worked, right? Like, I think the worst Tim Burton movies are always the ones where he's like remaking something else, and Dumbo or like Alice in Wonderland or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, whereas like when he does his own stuff, you know, when you got like Big Fish, that's when he hits. And I think it's a pretty clear like pattern at this point. So much so that when I go back and look at his Batmans now, I'm like, these actually aren't that good. But that's you know, they were revolutionary at the time because no one had seen anything like them. But like, there's a lot about them that I'm like, this is kind of ridiculous and a little cringe. But that's a separate conversation. We're not going to have it right now because we are going to get going. Zaki, it was really, really great to have you. I'm glad we could work this out.
Yes,
we'd love to have you back some point in the near future. In the meantime, where are the various ways that people can find you and your work on the internet?
As you said, I write for the San Francisco. Let me try that again. The San Francisco Chronicle. I do TV reviews for The Wrap. I also do movie and TV reviews at IGN. I also co-host the Movie Film Podcast with my friend Brian Hall, who's a television writer. And we do every other week we do a commentary track where we watch a movie and talk through it. And as it pertains to your show, we've just recently done Office Space and The Mummy and The Sixth Sense and Three Kings. She's All That we did. So we've done quite a few 1999 movies, and we had some great discussions about those. So if anybody's interested, that's a Movie Film, one word. And if you're looking for me online, you can find me at Zaki's Corner. That's ZAKIS Corner. And I'm there at Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram if anybody's looking to reach out, and I'd love to connect.
Awesome. And we will wait with bated breath to find out what you thought of the live action remake of Lilo and Stitch. I sincerely hope it's good. Julia, where are you on Blue Sky?
Julia Sermons, all one word.
All one word. I'm John Brooks, all one word. The show is 1999 Podcasts, all one word at Blue Sky. You can find us at cageclub.me. You can email us at 1999@cageclub.me. We'll be back next time. We're going to start our summer movie season with a much anticipated big tentpole blockbuster, one of the top 10 movies of the year that we still have not covered, but we're finally doing it. Won't tell you what it is, but if you look back at our back catalog, you can figure it out. So we'll see you all in a couple weeks. And without the rest, bye.